Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second to last session of our 2021 Impact Forum. I hope you all have a brew. So I'm Hannah Green. I'm the Lived Experiences Specialist at the Centre for Homelessness Impact. And the theme of the Impact Forum this year has been collective resilience. And I think this is such an important topic. The word resilience is often used in terms of personal resilience, which I think can be quite problematic. But I think this idea of collective resilience and community resilience is really, really important. So today, the theme specifically is looking forward to 2022. So how can we get everyone at the table and work towards an end to homelessness? And what is the role of community organisations within that in both preventing and ending homelessness? And I guess the question we're going to be trying to ask is, or trying to answer even, is how can we encourage a community approach to ending homelessness? So please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat box. Let us know where you're from. And I'm going to pose a question just to start off. If you let me know in the chat box, what does community mean to you? Also, we have a hashtag as well, Impact Forum 2021. Please do get involved on Twitter. And if you have any questions for any of the panelists at any point, there's a Q&A box in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. So please do pop your questions in there. So let's get started. I'm going to introduce our first panelist, who is Anthony Lavera. So Anthony he's an incredible artist, a writer, and an educator who's based in London. If you haven't checked out his work, you definitely should. Over to you, Anthony.
Thank you very much, Hannah, and thank you to everyone at the Centre for Homelessness Impact for inviting me to take part in today's event alongside amazing panelists, which I'm really looking forward to hearing from. Now I'm going to just begin by sharing my screen, so bear with me for a moment. So over the past 18 years, I have created long-term collaborative projects with people who have experienced homelessness in cities and towns across the UK, in places such as Belfast, Brighton, Colchester, in boroughs all over London, and most recently I've been working in Coventry and Birmingham. I've worked with hundreds of people, and through this process, I've collated thousands of photographs, video, sound recordings, and other pieces of ephemera created by participants that express their points of view and tell stories about the things they're interested in and their lives. The drive that propels me is to use the skills and resources I'm able to access and organize to shake up preconceptions of homelessness. And in doing so, to critically inquire into issues of access, power, representation, and social justice. At the heart of what I do is an ambition to work with people who are overly spoken for, to speak out about their experiences and the systems and services that shape their everyday lives. One of the most recent bodies of work is called Assembly, which was made in Brighton between 2012 and 2014, with over 50 people commissioned by the Brighton Photo Fringe. As part of Assembly, I initiated a partnership with the Brighton Housing Trust. And in the first year, I spent time getting to know the staff and individuals associated with two of their services, a hostel called Phase 1 and the First Base Day Centre. I then invited people to use cameras and digital sound recorders to capture their experiences. And I met with participants regularly to discuss their images and sounds and to record conversations. Participants were also invited to learn how to use digital medium format camera equipment over repeated sessions to create what I call an assisted self-portrait. And alongside this, I collaborated with the Cascade Chorus, a choir of people in recovery, to sing, record, and create a performance for the exhibition. And when Assembly was first exhibited in the Phoenix Gallery in Brighton, over 70 photographs were displayed, including images created by participants, documentation of us working together, and assisted self-portraits. A 45-minute soundscape that weaved out audio recordings played in the space. A piano was donated by Phase 1, and tables and chairs were lent by First Base, installed in the gallery to transform it into a community hub. Visitors were invited to participate in discussion events, play the piano, or spend time contemplating information about support services for homeless people across the UK. Now, in seeking a way to present this information about support and services around the UK, I spent time working with Tracy Chandler, a residential project manager for the Brighton Housing Trust. We gathered charity reports, governmental papers, pamphlets, flyers, posters, and project information. And initially my thinking was to provide this literature in the gallery space. However, upon reviewing all of this paperwork, it was striking just how general, corporate, impersonal, and often impenetrable much of it was, and how, within it all, very few practical questions appeared to be asked or answered. Rarely was it engaging to read, or did it appear useful in providing a legible picture of how to access care. And so I struck up a collaboration with Gerald, and here is Jerry. The idea was to gather information about the support and services available to a homeless person, but through a direct request from someone experiencing homelessness and in need of answers. Our work together began by sending email correspondence to council representatives in 44 local authorities across the UK, written from the point of view of someone experiencing homelessness, requesting information about the services provided in each locality. At the heart of this email are a number of questions that inquire about a person's right to access basic living provisions, such as shelter, personal safety, health, food, and communication. We compiled the responses and installed them in the exhibition of Assembly, providing a resource for visitors to consider, as well as the basis of public discussion events. 3 years after the first outing of frequently asked questions, throughout 2017, Gerald and I undertook a new round of research into 61 councils across the UK. I'm now going to hand over to Jerry.
People become homeless for a variety of reasons, some by choice and others by accident or bad luck. Anyone can potentially become a homeless person. After spending several years on the street experiencing homelessness firsthand, I have developed strong views on the subject. I believe that one of the most important things is to keep things as brief and simple as possible to avoid confusion. People can become ill, end up in prison, or even end up dead as a result of homelessness. I believe fighting homelessness is an ongoing battle that needs to be managed in the best possible way. There are many charities that claim to help the homeless, and a lot of the money made by these organisations often doesn't make it to street level and is unnecessarily wasted on things like administration and overheads. Please answer the following questions. I am a homeless person without any money. Where can I go for something to eat or drink? Where can I find shelter when it is raining or snowing? Where can I go to a toilet during the day? Where can I go to a toilet during the night? Where can I get a bath or a shower? Where can I get clothes, footwear and a blanket? Where can I sleep during the night that is safe? Where can I go to use a computer? Where can I go to use a telephone? Where can I go to see a doctor? Where can I go to see a dentist? I designed this simple list of questions written from a homeless person's point of view. What do I need and what do I expect to find? I believe there are many places in the United Kingdom that do not have adequate answers to these questions, and I am trying to raise awareness in order to improve the situation for people in the future. It may even save lives. Thank you very much.
The round of inquiries in 2017 resulted in a presentation at the Tate Liverpool with the Museum of Homelessness, and here we are launching the work at the Tate Modern. And then considering the introduction of the Homelessness Reduction Act, which came into law in 2018, legally binding local authorities with new duties in relation to homeless individuals. In 2019, we thought it was an important moment to conduct further questioning to see if the Act had resulted in any discernible change in the way that councils respond to a homeless individual reaching out for answers to these questions. The range of responses to the questions from across the country in every iteration of the project since 2014 is quite frankly alarming to me. On the whole, most of the replies are automated emails, occasionally signposting the reader towards websites and other general resources. Rarely does the sender acknowledge or engage with Jerry or the queries in a direct or practical way. And this in itself seems to me to say as much about the state of the nation's legislated support for people at risk or currently experiencing homelessness as any information provided. So I'm just going to briefly show you some work, to show you the work, Frequently Asked Questions, when it was displayed in Tate Liverpool The idea was to present a series of posters across a 13-meter stretch of wall that mapped the sort of the process of the project, but also provided some analysis of how the local authorities responded to Gerald's inquiry. We provided folders of all of the correspondence, as well as a kind of quick visual kind of map of the country so that people could very easily see how a local authority performed. And then there was also some kind of headline numbers. So 20 didn't reply in 2018. 31 sent auto replies. Only 5 actually answered the questions, that sort of thing. Another thing that we found really interesting was how very often the replies came back from departments in the local authority that were seemingly unrelated to housing or homelessness, and very often were outsourced to private companies. In the exhibition itself, there's always a section called What Are Your Questions? So that the audience are invited to fold into the life of the project the kinds of questions that should be asked as well, and the kind of responses that they feel should be seen by other people. But what I should say though is the work is, as an exhibition, isn't just looking at things on the wall. It's very much a participatory, kind of engaging conversation with audiences. And so with that in mind, the public program or the events that are staged in the space wherever the work is shown are absolutely critical to experiencing and seeing frequently asked questions. And those kinds of events have ranged from practical workshops like this one here, facilitated by Established Beyond in Tate Liverpool. And the workshop was about how to squat commercial properties and what your rights are in doing so. There were film screenings by local filmmakers involved in the squatting movement. There were more formal panel discussions involving CEOs of homelessness support services, academics working in various kinds of research fields, people working in relation to policy, but also in terms of the politics of these individuals, particularly when they come from research or policy perspectives. It was very important to me that we were kind of canvassing a range of perspectives and not just from kind of left-leaning Labour voting kind of individuals, so that we could really kind of start to understand the topics from a multiple sort of set of perspectives. There were also performances by the Choir with No Name. In June 2019, Gerald and I were invited to present frequently asked questions at the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Ending Homelessness, which was chaired by MP Neil Coyle. And that was a really kind of big moment for Jerry and I, to be able to kind of walk into that space, the seat of power, where people who kind of make decisions that directly affect Jerry's life, for him to be able to actually engage with them and speak to them in a very sort of human way was quite a powerful moment. In 2019, we did another round of inquiries. This time we reached out to 110 local authorities and we staged 2 exhibitions, one at the People's Republic of Stokes Croft in Bristol. And again, when I say exhibition, I'm not just talking about putting stuff on walls. So there was like a long table discussion with the Bristol Cable involving the housing minister, the cabinet minister for housing and the Bristol City Council, alongside legal experts, local support services. And the actual conversation itself was a participatory conversation, and one that involved the whole audience. It wasn't just speakers talking to an audience. And there are other events in Bristol as well, involving a reflective space for people to come together with the Museum of Homelessness for their Dying Homeless project, to reflect on the lives and celebrate the lives of people who died whilst experiencing homelessness. There was a 2-day creative workshop with a collaborative archaeologist called Rachel Kiddy and a local cultural organisation called IC Visual Lab to reflect on the representation of homelessness. So there was all these different kinds of tactics to try and reach into audiences, very specific audiences, to help them sort of think about homelessness in different kinds of ways. In the gallery at Foyles in London at the beginning of 2020, we staged an exhibition of frequently asked questions, but also assembled the photography project out of which frequently asked questions was conceived. And again, there was a What Are Your Questions section, and we staged a whole day of talks to really sort of bring together experts, including people with lived experience of homelessness, writers, historians, literature theorists, psychologists, employment specialists, theatre practitioners, artists, a whole range of people employing very different kind of creative tactics, but all towards pushing back against the causes of homelessness, trying to end homelessness and to advocate for housing justice. And then there was also a performance by the choir with no name. But a really important part of Frequently Asked Questions, and as a way of bringing my conversation with you or this presentation to a close, we created the Frequently Asked Questions publication, which kind of charts the information and the process of the project that Jerry and I have been working on to date, with the 3 samples from 2014, 2017, and 2019. And this book was sent to all 110 local authorities that we had reached out to throughout the duration of the project: housing and homelessness officers, MPs, councillors, ministers and departments for housing, communities and local government in each of the devolved nations. And it was also sent to all members of the All-Party Parliamentary Group for Ending Homelessness. And as a result, it was a huge mail out. And then, of course, we also sent copies out to people working in the support services for people experiencing homelessness. And what was really interesting about that mail out, because I really see that group of individuals as being one of the primary audiences for this work, was how it had this sort of follow-on effect in terms of opening up lines of communication between Gerald and I and people working in those different sorts of places. So, for instance, Islington Borough Council confirmed that policy debate within the council was stimulated by the work, leading to enhanced communications between disparate council groups. There was a really kind of positive response from Exeter City Council, which led to internal discussions between cabinet members and a realisation that council practices must be more coherent. And people like MP Nikki Aitken extended an invitation, and we met and discussed the work in relation to the research that she was undertaking earlier this year in preparation for the Westminster Hall debate on the Vagrancy Act. So, Frequently Asked Questions is still very much a live project. We're very much looking forward to the next iteration and realization of it. We don't quite know what that will look like yet or how it will be undertaken, but it will follow a similar kind of method in terms of reaching out to local authorities. Because as many of us today, or here today, as many of us here today may know, being subject to the industry of housing and homelessness support services can be a confusing experience of intrusive appointments and being signposted towards sermonizing advice that can leave the individual feeling powerless in their ability to express and access the rights that most people take for granted. And Frequently Asked Questions, what we hope, it seeks to map and document and enable conversations about the rights of people experiencing homelessness and the homelessness support services provided by local authorities across the country. And I kind of feel that this work provides a picture of how support services both help and hinder people, and gives an insight into the challenges and realities faced by the most marginalised individuals in society as they attempt to access systems of care. So thank you very much for listening to me today. And I really look forward to any questions, comments, or experiences that you may have to share when it comes to a discussion a little bit later. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Anthony, for that. And I guess what I'm really taking from that is the gaps in local authorities from lack of responses and what have you, and the role of Frequently Asked Questions, but also the role of community in bridging those gaps. Like Jerry said, he said street level, he said personal, he said engaging, and I think that really highlights what community can bring to people. So now I'm going to pass over to Gabriel. So Gabriel is the youngest ever board member of the YMCA Birmingham. He's also a fantastic public speaker. So over to you, Gabe.
Hannah, thanks. And Anthony, amazing work you and Jerry have produced. It's it always touches me, especially going through lived experience myself. And seeing sometimes that lack of response from local authority can, on an emotional level, it hurts to some degree to see how far removed we've become from our local authorities, and it's kind of asking ourselves those questions in so much as how can we build that communication and where have we gone wrong? And is it us that have gone wrong, or is it the local authorities that have gone wrong? And who needs to take accountability? Do we need to take accountability? Do the local authorities need to take accountability? And these are questions that I ask myself all the time, especially when I look at it from my experience. I never really saw a major, push from my local authority to want to end homelessness in so much, and seeing the work that you and Jerry created, to see that those auto responses and those lack of responses, it just makes me have that massive question mark of where are we going wrong, and why are we not working on this level of communication, and where the lines become blurred here. My thing is always heavy on communication. I'll just like to ask the question to local authorities is, where are you working on becoming a better communicator with the people that are going through these situations? How can we evidence where your communication skills are getting better? I feel that people that have lived experience will gain a lot more respect for local authorities if they stand up and say, I'm accountable for this. We're accountable for not being, the best communicators in this way, and actually standing on their faults in that sense. It is disappointing, and one thing I have to be honest about that, and I feel that none of us should hold back and feel that we can't say what we feel about this evidence that has been produced. Where is the accountability? Where is that person, or whoever is in command, saying this is where we've gone wrong and this is where we want to make that change? And that is where I'm going to stand, and that's where I'm going to stay, is where can we focus on building better communication channels, and who needs to be held accountable on the local authority side, and even on my side. If I stand for myself as an individual that has lived experience, tell me where I can be more accountable for trying to have better communication with you. I don't mind learning and wanting to be better in communicating with my local authority. Is there a better way to communicate with you? Please let me know. But that should go both ways. Who on the other side is taking this accountability? It's shocking that we can't have these clear communications, and we're being bounced to these auto emails and things like that. This shouldn't be happening. We first and foremost need to realize how important it is for us to have that clear channel of communication, because these are human beings, and you never know what can happen in anybody's life. You could end up on the other side. And I'm sure you would want to be able to have a clear channel of communication to work out how you can have answers to those questions that Jerry put forward, and be in a position to be able to change your life. So that's where I'm going to stand. And I hope that was pretty clear and straightforward on how I feel on the subject matter.
Thank you so much, Gabriel. That's a really important point around the role of communication for local authorities, but not just local authorities, for everyone. And I guess communication does play such a massive part of building communities, and building resilient communities as well. So now I'm really excited to introduce Cardboard Citizens, and I will let them take it from here.
Yo, brother, are you live and proper?
I'm somebody who loves to be outside. This is a complete change for me.
What is it you demand of us?
I think you ought to send some provisions for our relief.
Death now began not, as we may say, to hover over everyone's head only.
He was just scared, He was really scared of the situation. He didn't know what was going on.
When I was out in the park, I found a dead cat, and then I saw a man walking backwards.
I shall conclude the account of this calamitous year, therefore with a coarse but sincere stanza of my own.
Hi.
So thanks for that, Kiri. That's just a very brief trailer for the 6 short films which we are going to show, actually with Centre for Homelessness Impact later in the year when they're finished, all curated by different members of the team who participated in that project. So very briefly, I'm Adrian Jackson. I'm Director of Cardboard Citizens. And just to tell you about that project, in the context of your words, resilience, I already expressed the thought that resilience, which I think you've had this week, that resilience, I prefer resistance to resilience, the idea really, because resilience suggests putting up with things. And of course, we shouldn't put up with things, as demonstrated by the work we've just spoken about questioning things, as Anthony's work and Gabriel's work talks about questioning things. So very briefly, I hope you know who we are, Cardboard Citizens. We've been around for about 30 years. We make work, we make theatre with homeless and ex-homeless people and others. We want to tell untold stories, important stories, using the medium of theatre to achieve a number of different things. And when lockdown hit us, we wondered, what should we do? And yes, we needed to find some form of resilience together because it was a painful time, as for everyone. And quite quickly, we decided we would read a text together and bounce off it. So the text we chose to read was Daniel Defoe's Journal of the Plague Year, which was written in 1720 or something and reflected back on the plague of 1664-65. And it's a work of journalism, really, post facto, if you like. And why did we do that? We thought it'd be an interesting way to come at things, rather than just say to people, how are you finding things? What's happening to you? What are you noticing? We thought it would be more useful to bounce off something, to refract off something, a sort of third object for our attention, and to stimulate us to have thoughts and notice things, notice what seems strange to us. And of course, one of the advantages of this time that we've all lived through is that virtually everything was strange. And we just notice strange and small, but we're rather trained not to notice strangeness, aren't we? And so in that sense, it was very stimulating, like that announcement on the London Underground, if you see anything unusual, mention it to staff. Well, I've seen lots of unusual things. There's lots of homeless people around. What on earth's happening? That's unusual. So anyway, we encourage people to read the text together, which we did about once a week. Altogether, about 40 members of Cardboard Cits were involved. We really read the text pretty much from the beginning to the end. At the beginning, we would start with a check-in, see where everybody is, what's everybody been doing, how is everybody. Then we'd read a bit of text. And we encourage people to keep journals and diaries, photographs and everything of their own lives at the time, particularly where they crossed over with the text that we were reading. So I hope that makes sense. I don't want to talk very long because we're really about interactivity. So we're going to read you a small chunk of text, literally a page. Randomly, three people are going to read. And I'd like you to listen to it. And I invite you to notice anything that you notice. Have any questions, back to Anthony, have any questions that you have about the language, about the meaning, about things which make you think about things happening now. And we'll sort of perhaps do a little bit of what we've done in those sessions together, where I try and share a discussion, stimulate a debate. So please put any comments, questions, observations, bang them in the chat so I can bounce them off people at the end. Okay, here is a fairly random chunk of Daniel Defoe's Journal of the Plague Year, read by Danny, Jake, and Joe. Take it away. And this is about things that were happening in that time that our narrator notices, superstitious behaviors, and stuff like that. Okay, go, take it away.
One mischief always introduces another. These terrors and apprehensions of the people led them into 1,000 weak foolish and wicked things, which they wanted not a sort of people really wicked to encourage them to. And this was running about to fortune tellers, cunning men and astrologers to have their fortunes told them. And this folly presently made the town swarm with a wicked generation of pretenders to magic, to the black art, as they called it.
It became common to have signs and inscriptions set up at doors. Here lives a fortune teller, here lives an astrologer, and the like. With what blind, absurd, and ridiculous stuff these oracles of the devil pleased and satisfied the people, I really know not. But certain it is that innumerable attendants crowded about their doors every day.
While these things agitated the minds of the common people for many months, while the first apprehensions were upon them and the plague was not yet broken out. But I must also not forget that the more serious part of the inhabitants behaved after another manner.
The government encouraged their devotion and appointed public prayers and days of fasting and humiliation to make public confession of sin and implore the mercy of God to avert the dreadful judgment which hung over their heads.
And it is not to be expressed with what alacrity the people of all persuasions embraced the occasion, how they flocked to the churches and meetings, and they were all so thronged that there was often no coming near, no, not to the very doors of the largest churches.
Again, the public showed that they would bear their share in these things. The very court, which was then gay and luxurious, put on a face of just concern for the public danger.
All the plays and interludes which were forbid to act, the gaming tables, public dancing rooms and music houses were shut up and suppressed.
And the Jack puddings, Merry Andrews, puppet shows, rope dancers and such like doings, which had bewitched the poor common people, shut up their shops, finding indeed no trade.
The minds of the people were agitated with other things, and a kind of sadness and horror at all these things sat upon the countenances even of the common people. Death was before their eyes, and everybody began to think of their graves, not of mirth and diversions.
That's our brief reading. That's a page, a fairly random page of Defoe. And yes, I just invite you again, if there were words in there that struck you or ideas, I hope you were able to get it over the wonders of Zoom from 3 different places. Just stick them in the chat. If there were coincidences with now it made you think of, stick them in the chat. What we would normally do is, as I said, we also encourage people to document. We're not going to show you any of those documents, but we made a whole archive of stuff during that time, which will form part of the films that we're going to show. So while you're just thinking about if there's any particular things that struck you, their words, that, well, here's a challenge. What is a Jack pudding, do you think, people? What is a Jack pudding? I mean, a wonderful idea, but a Jack pudding. What is a Merry Andrew? Okay, because amongst the things that were closed down that you probably read, and the Jack puddings, Merry Andrews, puppet shows, rope dancers, and such like doings which bewitched the poor common people, shut up their shops, finding indeed no trade. But very good. Just a few, a brief comment from each of you would be great. All the people in the screen also curated films, some of these short films which we've been making. So maybe I can go to you first, Danny. How was just talk a little bit about what the project was for you, please.
Okay, so the project for me was a great lifeline in the middle of the pandemic and being stuck at home just like everybody else. And it was really great to be able to meet fellow Cardboard citizens every week, and also look at a text which, although it was a few hundred years prior, was so similar, if not, there were so many things that were almost exactly the same as our own experience, which was quite strangely quite therapeutic and yeah, comforting.
Very nice. Somebody was put in the chat, the minds of the people were agitated, very true of the current times, maybe amplified by social media. Absolutely. Yeah. One of the first things Defoe says is that there were no pamphlets at the time to publicize things, but actually in our time, yeah. And one of the things we've looked at is another thing somebody mentions here, parallels then are now misinformation, fear, magic, and anti-vaxxers. Actually, it was very interesting tackling the issue of anti-vaxxing, which I'm sure you guys working all with homeless and ex-homeless people, because it's a discussion which we have to have carefully. And not surprisingly, quite a lot of people who have been pretty badly treated by the powers that be in the past have distrust of the vaccination. And we had to gently find a way of talking about that without ramming anything down anyone's throats. Maybe, Jake, your observations or comments about doing it, what it was for you?
Yeah, so I feel that as a street performer and actor and losing completely my livelihood for a year and a half, this was a lifeline because it gave me something to do, something to engage with, something that I could speak back with. I feel that I've been, and everyone is being, slowly sucked into devices and computers and made into little zeros and ones, and that we're not really real people anymore. Unfortunately, that's what I feel in my darkest moments anyway. And I, being resilient, left my London flat and rented it out so that I could get an income, and came to live in a beautiful place, but in the country where it's much cheaper. And so therefore I discovered that what I was really lacking was a connection to nature, to our life support system, which of course is both red and in tooth and claw, as the virus perhaps indicates, but also benign, the beauty of the taste of a cool glass of water in the hot, muggy air.
Very nice. Thanks, Jake. We are intensely jealous of you. I'm not going to reveal where Jake is, but he's not in this country anymore because he ran away. Yeah, very good. Joe, a bunch of zeros and ones that you are. Could you say how it was for you? And then any questions, just sling in the chat. Go for it, Joe.
I was reflecting back when I first joined Cardboard Citizens. I was a squatter and living in a van, and I heard about Boal speaking. So I went along, saw Cardboard Cits do one of their very first shows, and went, that's what I want to do. I want to join that company because it was marrying activism and performing and making a change. And so that's when I joined Cardboard Cits. Years later now, doing this process, London on lockdown, it gave me a sense of community again. It made me be seen, be valued. And I think it's weird because I really hate Zoom and I hate all the technology and stuff. But I feel like I've really made friends within our Cardboard Cits community, and quite deep friendships. And the text, using that, was because we still had life after Defoe. We got through that plague. Humanity did survive. It sort of gave me an underlying hope, because I got really despondent and I was very depressed during the first lockdown. I found it incredibly difficult. But seeing that they got through that, it was like, okay, fingers crossed we can get through it too, and hopefully get to a better outcome.
Lovely, thanks, Joe. Look, I probably better round off. We've probably used up our slot. I hope there's a nice comment from Mathieu Lambert about the place of faith, which is an interesting thing. He writes, of course, in that section about how popular churches were, how people thronged, he says, to churches and places of worship, probably also not aware that they were entering sort of super spreader events at the same time, as we would now call them. But it's interesting to think about a resurgence of faith and, of course, the work done by faith-based organizations, which he helpfully points out. Look, I hope that was interesting and useful. Any comments, queries, questions? The films will follow up 6 films. They're each about 15 minutes long, which try to summarize the work. And Kiri, you were just going to round us out with clear instructions for use or something. Kiri.
Hi, I'm Kiri, and I am the participation producer at Cardboard Citizens. I just wanted to say exactly what Adrian said. Please go and follow our films. We are part of the exhibition of the Impact Homeless Festival, and you will see all the information about Cardboard Citizens, about our work, and the films that are coming up to date. We also will be having a live event in July as part of Aldgate Summer Festival, which will make all that information also available on our website. So also check out Cardboard Citizens website in your own time. And thank you for having us today.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. That was incredible. And Adrian, that quote, resistance, not resilience, I absolutely love that. And I think one of the main things I've taken from that is this idea of social distancing. And although we're having to be physically distant, a lot of us maybe socially are more connected than ever. And I guess it highlights that, yes, we're physically distant, but really we're not socially distant in many ways. So now I'm hoping, now I can't see Bonnie on my screen, but I'm hoping we are now joined by Bonnie Navarra, who is the Director of Wales Housing Justice. So,
hi, Hannah.
Amazing. Perfect. Over to Bonnie.
Thanks. And thanks, Hannah, and thanks for having me today. So today I was just going to talk a bit about resilience and our learnings of having to shift services due to the pandemic, and really focusing on them becoming housing led and prioritising that need for those experiencing homelessness and the benefits of that we've seen. So as Hannah said, my name's Bonnie Navarra and I'm the Director of Housing Justice Cymru, and we're a homelessness and housing need charity. And we run a number of different projects, including converting church land and buildings into truly affordable homes, and hosting people seeking sanctuary. But one of our projects was, until the beginning of the pandemic, the night shelters in Wales. And when the pandemic hit, we suddenly had to change our operating model really drastically and very quickly. So we looked at how we could reuse our 600 volunteers from 3 areas in Wales to help those people experiencing homelessness, but in a housing-led way. And so we developed a new programme with the people that we support. We asked them what they needed, what they wanted, and 100% of the people that we asked wanted more support once they'd found a tenancy. And they told us what type of support they wanted, what they needed help with, and how they wanted it to work. So consequently, we developed our programme called Citadel, where we work with volunteers to train, DBS check them and match them with individuals experiencing homelessness to help them find and maintain tenancies. And to many people that might sound like floating support, but there's a real key difference in our model, and that's volunteers. And volunteers are absolutely vital to the success and benefit of our work for a number of different reasons. And we're really grateful to the local authorities that we're working with for understanding actually the benefit of volunteers and the connection and difference that makes for the people that we support. We know that many of the people unfortunately have had adverse childhood experiences. So in their childhoods, they've experienced things within the home primarily, where there's been parents using substances, having mental health problems, having a parent that's incarcerated, and so on, abuse, neglect, and so on. And we know that that goes on to cause significant trauma and changes the way that the body and brain develops. And tragically, that means that if you've got 4 or more adverse childhood experiences in Wales, you're 16 times more likely to experience homelessness. And we know that 50% of the homelessness population in Wales that we surveyed reported having 4 or more adverse childhood experiences. So you can see that the correlation is really high. And that's vital evidence base for us to work on as services, to understand how we can address people's needs and, crucially, how we can overcome trauma. And the key there is resilience. So hence the theme of what I'm talking about and the theme of today. And our research that Public Health Wales did into adverse childhood experiences in Wales showed that the key 2 resilience factors for people with adverse childhood experiences of which my children have one. They're incredibly common in Wales, and I'm not sitting here preaching because they're incredibly common, and my own children have one. But if you have 4 or more, they become particularly difficult. But there are 2 key things to help build resilience to overcome the trauma that some people have suffered. And those are an adult connection, a trusted adult, and a continued relationship with that trusted adult, and community connectivity. And so those things come classically from volunteers within your community. And we've seen that time and time again with the people we support, saying that knowing that the volunteer is there because they're not paid, having a trusted relationship with that volunteer, and that's someone from their community to help them connect. If we've moved someone, for example, from living on the streets in this place to a town over here, or from living in a shared accommodation or a B&B in this village to somewhere over here, through no choice of their own, but through housing allocation, they're in a completely new community, and being connected to that community is absolutely key for their well-being, and to turn what is initially a tenancy into a home and a place that they want to live in and want to sustain. And that's absolutely key for us. And the pandemic has shown us again how important those communities ties are. While that was taken away from us during lockdown, we've seen mental health and well-being really suffer, because the importance of knowing someone when you walk down the high street, or bumping into a mum at the school gates, or a friend in Tesco. And again, creating that network for the people that we support who have experienced homelessness is absolutely vital. So our big lesson from the pandemic and shifting our services to housing-led focus has been the importance of volunteers, community connection, and that trusted adult role, and allowing local authorities to really learn about how they can involve the community in their responses to homelessness and the benefit that will bring to those people that we serve. Thank you.
Thank you, Bonnie. There were some really interesting points there, and something that, I think the thing about relationships and connections and local communities is so important, and something I've learned from my own experiences of homelessness, but also, I guess, the past year, is that we can exist on our own, but we can't thrive on our own. And if we try and exist on our own, we can get by, but it's not a great existence, which is why community is so important. So I have a question now for the panelists, and if anyone has any other questions, please do pop them in the chat. And the question is, how can we encourage a move towards a community approach to ending homelessness? So Gabriel, I'm going to come to you first, if that's okay.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can. Yeah.
Okay. I feel what it takes to move towards more of a community-led approach towards ending homelessness. We need more leaders, and we need to champion those leaders, and those leaders will then encourage more individuals to become leaders in and of themselves. I feel it takes us leading by example, and to create more positive language around, homelessness, and to know that it's not something that takes away from somebody's character. It's actually something that, it can build resilience, within an individual. And to have more of those positive narratives represented around the subject, I feel will not only raise, the spirits and ambitions of those facing the problem of homelessness, but also the communities that are around and actually viewing homelessness from the outside, because homelessness actually isn't an individual's problem alone. It is actually the community's problem, and something they should also look at. But we have to think that we need the narrative to change for the individuals that view homelessness from the outside. It shouldn't always be about the individuals that are actually facing homelessness having to look at it all the time. We need to actually say, there are positive narratives out there around people that have faced homelessness. And once the community can then tap into those narratives, what they think about homelessness will begin to change. The way they see the future of homelessness changing can also then be added into those communities, which I think is very important. It takes leaders to do that. It takes people to want to stand up and say, we want to change these narratives, and promote more of these positive narratives. And once that then begins to happen, we'll then begin to change the mindset of individuals that may have viewed homelessness in a certain way, and they'll begin to change their way they think about it. You know, it might get to a point where people then start to begin to say, you know, as a community together, we can end homelessness, rather than looking at it and saying it's just a governmental issue or it's just that individual's issue. People then can begin to look at it, well, what is it that I can do? Can I volunteer? Can I do this? Can I do that? You know, it's actually something that I'm a part of. And when we start to promote more of those narratives around maybe volunteering or around how people within the community play such a pivotal role within homelessness, I feel then we'll then begin to get closer towards ending it within our communities.
Thank you, Gabriel. And I think that's such important points as well. And I find that from my experiences and maybe from yours as well, you know, services, systems, local authorities, they have this real need to label people and put people in boxes and tick boxes, which, you know, maybe that's for funding or whatever. But I've found that when you know, communities don't have that, and communities, you know, they allow you to be alongside of each other without this intention of trying to fix each other, which I think, you know, is maybe what we're missing. So Anthony, I'm going to come to you now, because I'm very aware that some of the things Gabriel said about positive narratives and creating a different picture around homelessness links in very much to the work that you're doing. So I'm going to pose the same question to you. How can we encourage a move towards a community approach to ending homelessness?
I'm really troubled by the question, because on the one hand, you know, Gabriel spoke so eloquently there, and I agree with him 100%. But then I also sort of feel that community, the notion of community, the experience of community has been so hijacked by the state over the last 30 years. And if you think about the kind of community-led grassroots initiatives in the 1970s, which essentially founded a lot of the support services and sector kind of organizations that are very much established now, and are kind of leading the way in terms of delivering support and you know, raising a critical consciousness, but also kind of lobbying politicians. I guess what I'm trying to say is that I sort of feel like homelessness is a political problem, you know, and the pandemic has shown us that huge kind of seismic shifts can happen in terms of shifting resources to address issues. And if there is a political will, homelessness can be solved. And in that sense, yes, I believe that we all have to take collective responsibility. We have to be allies for each other. We have to agitate alongside each other. But and there is a role for a community approach in terms of lobbying for the changes that need to be made and informing the changes that need to be made. But I don't know. I guess perhaps I'm not making much sense here, because I'm still trying to really formulate my sort of thinking. But I feel like it's a community approach alone won't end homelessness. It might inform some of the changes that can happen, but it's a political problem.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I agree with a lot of what you're saying there. And I guess maybe I'm going to change the question slightly before I pass it over to Bonnie. So maybe how can we encourage how can we encourage a move towards I guess collective resilience and community, and using communities to build resilience, and I guess the role of community resilience in building personal resilience.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm going to put to you, Bonnie.
Yeah. Thanks, Hannah. I think that's a really great question, following the previous discussion. And I think Gabriel and Anthony's answers are absolutely spot on. But it's a combination of both, isn't it? So we've got to have the political change to enable access to housing for everybody. We have to have housing as a human right. There's been so much research on this by the UN and so many people. And it's absolutely fundamental, because without that, all community efforts won't end homelessness. You know, to properly dismantle it, we have to have that that political drive and change and shift of finances and policy. But that, as Gabrielle says, that has to be coupled with the support of the community and all of us looking at ourselves to see what can we do. And it's not just about, you know, I think someone's put it in the comments, not just about looking at then specific homelessness, but actually anybody that's having a hard time, anybody that's experienced trauma, and anybody that needs that help with building resilience. And that can be for a whole different number of reasons. But it's in all of our interests to do that. And coupled with availability of truly affordable housing, that's how we will end homelessness, is to, as communities, wrap around those that need support and help, enable people to access the housing that should be available from the government and to maintain it and to thrive within that life. I have to say that we're very fortunate in Wales that we've taken a real shift and used the opportunity. I say used, our current government has used the opportunity to use the pandemic to end, or at the moment at least, and for the foreseeable future, priority need and community connections. So everybody presenting as homeless at the moment should be able to access accommodation. We do have work to go on making accommodation truly affordable. But we have really good decency standards in Wales. And so at the moment, we are significantly reducing homelessness. We have a long way to go. We have a supply and demand issue. We have issues with making that offer available or suitable for everybody. So if the trauma you've experienced, for example, is within the house, you may not see a house as a safe place. But anyway, we're on a path, and it's really interesting to see where it'll go. But from my point of view, those two things of political drive and then community wraparound are going to be crucial if we're really to end homelessness.
Thank you. And Gabrielle, I want to come back to you quickly because I've heard you speak about something similar before. And I'm curious to know what examples of community interventions you've seen working and why did they work?
So it's community interventions. I wouldn't necessarily say they were solely community based. Let's put it like this, for example, an intervention that actually helped me came from an organization. So an organization, you may have heard of the National Grid. That intervention that they had going on called Grid for Good actually helped me within my community and actually helping other people that are going through socio-economically disadvantaged situations, you know, within communities like that, actually get into positions of, you know, maybe they need upskilling, maybe those individuals need work opportunities or work experience. The reason why I connect it outside of just community alone is because it might actually take a bigger push from organizations, you know, that have the infrastructure to support individuals through this process that they're going through to get out of the situations that they're in. It actually kind of is an amalgamation of both having communities involved. So that's the people that are going through what's happening. That's the charitable organization that may house where that event can happen. And then that's the organization that's coming in to actually provide something that can support these people that are happening. I see that as community, maybe on a wider scale. And I feel that these types of interventions actually then they open the government's eyes, I feel, because if an organization like that, for just an example's sake, I'm sure there's a lot of organizations out there that are supporting communities do this, it actually then puts a big spotlight on the government and says, well, why are organizations that aren't governmental organizations stepping in to make these changes, and why are the government not getting involved in these things? So in terms of intervention, I feel that if organizations within a community can step in and provide support and provide opportunities or ways out for individuals, that are going through homelessness, I feel that then can put a spotlight on the government and actually encourage them to actually step their game up and say, well, how can we get involved, and how can we support more organizations, even on a local level, to get in there, to connect with possible maybe charities, for example, or to connect with people that are suffering from homelessness and need that way out. I feel that that's a great way to encourage them to do that.
Thank you, Gabriel. So I'm aware of the time, so I'm just going to share some final thoughts. So linking back to my own experiences of homelessness, two of the things that helped me the most, both, I guess, community type, maybe not interventions, but community type things. So first of all, surfing, and second of all, an organization called Camarados. And I'm highlighting those because when you're in the homelessness system or services or whatever, there's not much space to do things that are fun and to do like normal human things. And I think that is where maybe communities come into it, to provide things like surfing or art or knitting or whatever it might be. Within systems and services, it's life skills and budgeting and those outcome star charts that you all know exactly what I'm talking about. So I think maybe some thoughts to leave you with is that the role of communities to provide those normal human experiences that we all need. So I just want to thank all of our fantastic panelists. I couldn't have asked to chair a better session with a better group of people. Please do carry on the conversation on Twitter. Let us know what you think. And don't forget, we have our final session of this year's Impact Forum starting at 4 p.m. I'm sure one of my fabulous colleagues will have put a link in the chat. Thank you so much for joining us today.